bringing you the best in New York Giants sports talk and entertainment. Well, I was thinking today, okay, free agency's done, draft is done, we're picking up undrafted free agents. We may pick up a couple ancillary players in the free agent market before or after or during training camp. So the roster, of course, is not even close to being set. But a question that ran through my mind was, how are the 2020 Giants going to generate a pass rush? Now, right now, there's no Marcus Golden. There's no Javion Clowney. There's no Yannick Ngakoue. We brought some players in, but what are we going to do to generate this pass rush? How is Patrick Graham going to turn around and make the Giants fearsome and hopefully have the secondary hold up a little bit better by generating a consistent pass rush? Now, Joe Judge said back in, I think it was beginning of April, he had a great quote where he basically, and I'll just break it down, he basically said, yes, every team in the league wants a premier pass rusher, but if you don't have one, you need to come up with a system that will allow you to generate a pass rush using 3 or 4 different guys, which is a very astute thing to say. Yes, that's exactly what you need. If you don't have the premier guy, you need to have a continuum of players who can work well together and generate the pass rush on a consistent basis. Now, Patrick Graham, I think Avery Moss, who used to be a Giants defensive end, played for, actually started 8 games in Miami last season, and he basically said that Graham runs basically a 3-4. But his quote exactly was, but it's truly multiple. It's will sometimes be a 4-3. Well, then we'll go to a 6-2 front, and then we'll have that's when our primary defense will be for a couple weeks. Then we'll have a couple weeks. We also ran a 3D tackles and 2 outside linebackers. It's really wild. I guess it's a 3-4 base, but trying to use more different types of bodies among the front 5. So that's a quote from Avery Moss, who used to be with the Giants, that played for Patrick last year when he was the defensive coordinator, of course, with Miami. So, it's going to be similar. It's going to be a multiple front situation, sort of like we used under James Bettcher, but I think it's going to be a little bit different. Now, the other question is going to be Brian Flores, who, of course, was a defensive-minded guy. So how much of the system that was run in Miami was Brian Flores compared to Patrick Graham? And that's a question. So he said we won't really know until maybe a couple of weeks in the training camp exactly what the system's going to be. But the question will be: is he going to be? Is it going to be something different, or was Brian Flores more implementing his own defense? Which will be interesting to see. Now we have really a young collection of defensive linemen, corners. So it's going to be interesting, and I was just looking to see how we can generate the pass rush. One of my biggest things I was looking at was Lorenzo Carter. Carter was basically used as a utility defensive player for Bettcher. I mean, kind of his roles changed. He would swap out snaps at the outside linebacker or the inside linebacker, defensive end, defensive tackle. He was kind of everywhere. He was also used, he dropped back into coverage, he covered backs at the backfields, he tried to carry the tight end vertically, which he didn't do a great job of. And, it really kind of showed a decline in his second season. And I think what's going to happen with Patrick is I think he is going to, I would hope that he's going to take a look at the fact that, in his second year, Carter was kind of misused. So I think it's interesting that breaking down some of the film of, and again, this is from the Miami, so we don't know, again, how much is Flores and how much is Graham, but Graham often deployed a package that put 2 defensive linemen in 2 techniques, which is basically heads up versus the guards. And then he also did 2 stand-up linebackers in a 9 technique outside the offensive tackle. Basically, if you take a look at it, if he were to play Carter in that 9 technique spot, his athleticism, will really help him bend the edge and consistently get to the cornerback. Now, I think that's an interesting way to look at it, especially for Carter. And then I take a look at Peppers. I think Peppers is going to be the player that has the biggest role change in the defense. Now, if you go back to Miami, and again, all we have is the Miami film. So in Miami, Graham kind of implemented a single high coverages on roughly 3/4 of his defensive snaps. And that's versus the 2/3, single high coverage that Betcher ran. So, it's going to be... So, in other words, in layman's terms, Graham is going to take Peppers and put him in the box. He's going to be more of an in-box safety. And that's kind of where his skill set lends. Coming out of Michigan, Peppers was, mainly seen as a guy that was utility safety, but he always played better closer to the line. It's almost like the Landon Collins situation. Landon Collins was an in-the-box safety. He had minimal coverage skills, but he excelled that 1 year, playing close to the line. And I think that's exactly how they're going to prioritize and scheme Peppers as well. And also the fact that, moving him closer to the line is going to allow him to blitz like we did with Collins. And it's, he still is going to be adequate enough to cover if he needs to cover out through the defensive end. If he's going to need to cover someone coming out of the offensive backfield. Now, another players that I was looking at that we're going to have to probably start generating some rush from, of course, is going to be Leonard Williams and Dexter Lawrence. Now, of course, Leonard Williams only was good for half a sack last year with, so with 26 tackles. So, while he wasn't dominant, he could potentially go back to where he was. And if we're going to be playing in a multiple front system, he could be anywhere lining up on a 4-3, a 3-4, a 2-4, a 3-3-5. It just could be however Graham wants to cover or call the defense that year. And then with Graham, if you watch again, we're watching just the Miami film. He had a couple times where I saw where he lined up one defensive lineman and 3 or 4 linebackers that would either blitz or drop back into coverage, with the linemen predominantly used just to eat up the blocks with the guards in the center. So he's got a pretty, like I said, and again, this is going off the Miami film. He's got a sophisticated front that we could really, that you can really take a look at. And then I was thinking, we're going to possibly be trying to generate from some pressure from the corners, either from Julian Love, DeAndre Baker, Sam Beal, Corey Ballantyne. He was very, that was interesting. He was very creative in Miami with blitzing his defensive backs. So, and I think that's, if you take a look, like I said, we did a little bit of a breakdown, and last year Graham sent the defensive backs on about, I should rephrase that. Graham blitzed using defensive backs 35% of the snaps last year, which was the 7th highest frequency in the NFL. That jumped to 41% blitz rate on 3rd down, which was the league highest. So he's a guy that's not afraid to bring the corners. So again, now we're looking at, like I said, what Joe Judge was saying, we're going to potentially be bringing people in from the corner position. We're going to be, trying to move around the defensive linemen. And, same thing with Peppers. And hopefully Lorenzo Carter can move forward. And then we're also going to take a look at potentially, of course, we have O'Shane Ximenez, who I think is going to have an interesting year this year. We don't know, Kyler. Everyone's high on Kyler, and I hope Kyler has a great season, but I said it a million times. Last year, his last year in Green Bay thought so highly of his 10-sack season that they signed 2 free agent starting linebackers and drafted one. So, whatever we get from Kyler, I'm going to be happy. But like I said, I don't want to look at it, a lot of it being, naming players. Like I said, what I went through more of is what the schemes could potentially be, for, and how they may relate to what the Patrick defense was in Miami. And like I said, hopefully, with Patrick, I keep calling him Patrick like he's my buddy. Patrick Graham, like I said, it's going to be interesting to see how he utilizes the talent, because he has a lot of different talent. Now, I know a lot of people are high on Cam Brown and T.J. Brunson and Carter Coughlin, but if you go back a minute and we'll take a look, and we actually found the stats going back to 95, 6th and 7th round players make the roster and contribute less than 15%. They have a 15% chance of making the roster and competing. They're mainly used as, I don't want to say it because it's not a bad thing, but like I said, they're usually on the practice squad, until they work their way through. And so, like I said, Cameron Brown was the first guy, a linebacker on the Penn State drafted since 2013. And why he's 6'5", 233 pounds, he is really truly an every down linebacker, but he doesn't have good speed. He ran a 4.7. He's not that strong. I mean, he can be maybe a special teams contributor, but I don't see him. Like I said, in his 4 seasons at Penn State, he only had 4.5 sacks. I think a coach with Tampa Bay told me once something back in 2003, and he basically said, if you have to draft 4 or 5 of one position, that means you don't have one of anything. You don't have one of anything in that position. So, I mean, and which made sense, because like I said, if you're trying to fill your roster, if you grab 4 linebackers in the last 2 rounds, that means in your mind you don't have any linebackers. You don't have any, and I shouldn't even say that, because like I said, I like Blake Martinez. We did a whole video on Blake Martinez. I hope Blake Martinez goes back to where he was. I hate when the music all of a sudden just comes in the middle of nowhere. Whoa, did it again. I don't know what's going on today, but like I said, we're not ending the show just yet. There was a little technical difficulty there, but Blake Martinez, we did a whole video on Blake because we liked what we see with him in regards to tackling. We like how he plays. He's a heady, smart up guy. The only thing is his coverage skills. If we're getting to Blake Martinez from 3 years ago when he was the 8th best cover linebacker, I'll be happy with that. If we're getting the Blake Martinez from 4 years ago, where he was number 48, I'm not going to be happy with that. He was in the mid-20s last year in the rankings. He was like 26th or 27th rankings in coverage for linebackers. But like I said, it's interesting to see. I think Graham is going to have an interesting time because I think he's got a lot of assets, and I think he can move them around. And I really do think that he is going to find a way. Unlike Betcher, who could not find a way outside of Marcus Golden, I think that Patrick is going to find a way to generate a pass rush for the New York Giants in 2020. I'm excited to see what he can do. But again, this is Tim with Online Big Blue, bringing you the best in New York Giants sports talk and entertainment. And as always, if you could subscribe, if you could ring the bell, that would be awesome.